The United States is going to veto anything that is even remotely designed to protect Palestinians on the ground. We have allowed the powerful states to abuse the legal order, the legal rules, in their own interest.
But doesn't it sort of almost point a direction to the establishment of a elitist global power?
And she said to me, and I remember this, and it was a brutal question for me to answer, what can international law do for my family now, today? And I had to say the truth, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I think people sometimes look at the wrong people for the answer here. We can't let our political class, the same people that are leaders, right, Muslims, non-Muslims, whatever they might be, that are in charge of our countries, off the hook.
But yet you cannot do it unless you can tell me, yes, you can do it.
What you're asking me is, do you ever win?
Yes,
Right?
that's right.
And the answer to that is we win a lot. 2009, I was involved in a legal team, I led a legal team, that applied for an arrest warrant for an Israeli former foreign minister called Zipi Livni. I am 100%, not 99%, 100% sure there will be accountability actions in Western countries against people that have committed war crimes in the last 2 years. Israeli actors in Gaza, for example, Israeli IDF soldiers. I'm sure about that.
Why are you so confident?
Because I'm working on it and I know the strength of my work. It's not secret that if you're going to do this kind of work, you have to have a contingency plan, because you might not be allowed to do it the more successful you get. And I don't think that I could spend a single minute of my life not engaged in an accountability structure when I think of the men, women, and children that I've met that have been harmed in war.
Salam and welcome to Lanterns of Liberation. International law is supposed to be the rules that govern the world. But what happens when the most powerful countries break those rules and nothing happens? Is international law a real tool for justice, or just a language of legitimacy used by those in power? Today we're asking whether international law can actually redress justice, or rather injustice, whether it restrains power or protects it, and whether it's worth defending it at all. In this episode, we speak with an expert in international law to confront its promises, its contradiction, and its future. To discuss if international law can deliver justice or international law is just the language of the powerful, I am joined by Tayyab Ali. Tayyab is an international recognized and highly respected solicitor advocate. He is a partner and head of international law at a London firm called Bindmans. Tayyab's work and case profiles have consistently been recognized by the principal legal directories, which have ranked him as a leading lawyer in multiple practice areas. Chambers and partners describe him as an irresistible force. He's fearless and he always gets the right result for his clients. He is rated as a super lawyer by Thomson Reuters and recognized in the field of civil liberties by the Legal 500. Tayyab, salam, and thank you for joining Lanterns of Liberation.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's an honor to have you. You're at the forefront rather than just an academic sitting in an ivory tower. But before we start, Tayyab, what if you can help our listeners and viewers with what exactly is international law?
Yeah, it's actually these days, in the current situation we're in, it's a really good question. What is international law? What is it supposed to be? What is it in reality? So let's start with domestic law, because it's an easier way for people to understand. Domestic law is designed to deal with the relationships between people. And it's straightforward. So, for example, we know we can't steal from each other. We know we can't kill each other. And we know we can't harm each other. We know there's rules about what you watch on the TV, what you watch on the computer. And we also know there's rules, really strict rules about how fast you can drive on the motorway. And these are enforced domestically. And that domestic law comes essentially from Parliament. Parliament decides what our relationships with each other are. And that's what law is meant to do. It's meant to enforce and regulate the relationships between people so people are generally safe. And international law, if you think about it, is no different to that, except you talk about it at a state level. So there's two aspects of international law. It's the relationship and the interaction, the regulation between states, how they treat each other. For example, sovereignty, how you respect your sovereignty. how you respect territorial integrity. So you can't just walk into the country next door and just it becomes yours. You used to be able to do that. International law is meant to stop that. But further than that, it has global impact on how people are treated by states, and it's to regulate those states. So, for example, you have serious international crimes like the prevention of torture, war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, and the idea of international law is to regulate that, so states don't overreach, states don't impact on an individual, and that's on a basic level an explanation about it.
Sure, and that's very helpful. But obviously, one question that arises that in the domestic law, the example you give, you have the police who monitor that, right? Who does it at an international law?
Yeah, and that's exactly the failure that we have at the moment. On an international law level, there isn't a police force. We don't have you have United Nations soldiers that sometimes come together, peacekeepers, we call them so from time to time, but we don't actually have a standing police force. And that, you could argue, is a failure in the international law system. But then you question, is it a failure or is it by design? Is it something that was meant to not happen? And then you look at the way international law works on a global level. So let's talk about that. You have treaties.
Yeah.
International law doesn't come from parliaments deciding something. It's from states agreeing pieces of paper between each other saying, okay, you and I, or this group of countries, or as a globe, we're going to go towards this. So you have the sort of United Nations Convention Against Torture, the United Nations Charter, for example. Also from that comes the institutions themselves. But there's something really important in this. The failure really is that the way we treat our domestic states is not the way we treat international law at a global level. So, for example, we have the United Nations, and we have the 5 permanent members of the Security Council who have this thing called the power of veto. And what that means is that if you're, bring it to a domestic level, if you're driving up the street 110 miles per hour and you get pulled over by the police and the police say, excuse me, this is not allowed to happen anymore, the equivalent would be the person in the car saying, well, actually, hey, I've got the power of veto because I'm particularly special or important. And the police officer go, oh yeah, sorry, sir, off you go. That's the way that it works at the United Nations. And that's why you have this breakdown right at the very beginning of international law. But it's important to understand that in some ways. How do you get the most powerful countries to the table to sit around the Security Council and actually agree to give away some of their power?
Yeah.
The way that we did that was to guarantee the most powerful states in the world that power of veto, say, look, please come to the table, please engage with this. Here are the set of values, here are the rules, here's the law. But with that, you do have a power of veto. So if you get a bit worried about it, rather than walking away, you can just say, oh, not for me, not today, thank you very much. That's what veto is supposed to be for. I want to just finish by saying this one thing, which is with that power, with that strength is meant to come responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's what we're lacking. Those powerful states have taken it on themselves to utilize veto in their own interests and not live up to their responsibility. And what that means is not apply that equally or to protect people across the globe.
Could I also extend that? It's not a veto only for themselves, but also their friends.
Yeah, I mean, it amounts to the same thing.
Yeah.
So when you have let's name names.
Yeah.
When you have the United States who wields that veto in the way that it does, and something happens with regards to Israel, you know full well that the United States is going to veto anything that is even remotely designed to protect the Palestinians on the ground in Gaza or the West Bank or Jerusalem. And so, yeah, but that is because that veto wielding power decides that that's in its interest, and that's why it wields the veto. I can guarantee you, the minute it decides it's not in its interest, it won't wield that power. And we've seen that just recently, in not so much in terms of the Security Council, but in terms of wielding that power with its own allies, with Greenland.
Yeah.
And you see suddenly the United States become a military, an economic, and a diplomatic threat to Greenland, and suddenly the wielding power, the veto wielding power in the world is like everybody else's, all its allies that have been supporting it up till very recently, is like, wow, where did that come from? And suddenly international law, the acceptance of what international law is in reality, comes to.
But isn't it, in a way, and I don't want to start too much negative already on international law, but doesn't it sort of almost point a direction to the establishment of a elitist global power?
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's not, I wouldn't say this is a downer on it. In order to address any problem, you have to accept what the problem is first. You know, You can't break a drug addiction unless you accept you have a drug addiction. And then you can start to examine it, analyze it, and fix the problem. What we've had, I had a really interesting conversation, which I'll come to in a minute earlier on today with a client of mine actually. But what we have is we've had Western states and Europe benefiting from the international law system, and let's change that a little bit, because there's something separate. There's the international law system, which is actually brilliant if it worked, but we've got something else. We've got something that you've heard increasingly referred to as the rules-based order, which is not international law. What the rules-based order is how the powerful states, or the collective of powerful states and their allies, utilize, abuse the rule of law, or the international legal mechanism and institutions. And so what you've got there is, while in Europe, in the United States and its allies, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, while it's benefiting them, they think, well, this is our values-based, rules-based system. It's great. And it's true, because if you look at the borders between Europe, there hasn't been a war in Europe until the Ukraine war, right? There hasn't been a military conflict between the United States and Europe since its independence. And you're saying, well, if you look at that in that closed circuit, you're thinking this is brilliant, it works fine. And you would support that. And as a diplomat and as a minister and MP, you say, well, it works great. And then you look at the rest of the world. You look at the African states, you look at the Middle Eastern states, you look at the Far East, and you're suddenly starting to think, well, yeah, that's because they're not civilized, right? This is a simple answer. It's and you export that rules-based system to them, and you say, you guys need to adhere to these rules, and then you'll be like us. You'll be prosperous, economically fluid. You'll be able to move forward. That's not the truth. The truth is that this group of countries have exploited those other countries and used their rules-based system to make them compliant to their own interests. And that's what you've got. That's what you've got seen happening in that context with those.
Isn't it almost like legal colonialism?
It's exactly what it is. It's utilizing.
You're a defender for international law. And
No. I'll come to that in a minute. You are allowing the powerful. We have allowed the powerful states to abuse the legal order, the legal rules in their own interests. And this is where you have impunity for themselves and their allies, but not for anybody else. I can tell you something. I don't want to name the states because some of it comes from my work, but I have states that have said to us, just on one human rights issue, we've had financial, economic funding withdrawn from our state, from our development projects, on one human rights issue. Yeah. Whereas at the same time, you can have, let's say, for example, that may have been equality between men and women or LGBT rights. Straightforward. We've been with funding withdrawn because we don't have a good record on that. At the same time, the same countries that are withdrawing that funding are going into other states like Syria, like Gaza, like Iraq, and annihilating the entirety of a human being in the millions, in the hundreds of thousands. But that isn't something sufficient to cause the same level of angst and upset and violation. So what I'm saying to you is that, yeah, I am a massive supporter of international law, the rule of law, and the principles of justice. What I am not a supporter of is the breakdown of that, the abuse of that, the use of that for self-interest as an exponent or a persuader of your own foreign policy interests. The main issue here is it's not applied equally to everybody across this globe.
That raises quite a few questions for me. Let me start with saying, how can this system, international law, redress to save lives?
Well, I was asked in the height of the attacks in Gaza by somebody who said to me in the audience of a panel event that I was doing, a Palestinian, who had family members who had been killed in Gaza and were continuing to be attacked by Israel in Gaza illegally in what I would call acts of war crimes, really straightforward. And she said to me, and I remember this, and it was a brutal question for me to answer, what can international law do for my family now, today? And I had to say the truth, nothing. Absolutely nothing. It could, and I'll explain why I said that, right? It was a hard admission. I've learned a lot in the last few years, by the way, right? It was a hard admission because actually law is there to regulate your behavior. Breaches happen of law.
Yeah.
And then you're meant to have accountability. You're not meant to have impunity.
Yeah.
Accountability always comes after the event. You can only prosecute somebody for murder after they've killed somebody. You can only prosecute somebody for speeding, for driving dangerously after the event. You can't really infect them at the moment in time unless you've got a police force that can stop that from happening. The answer really is it's for the political class, the politicians, the leaders of the United Kingdom, Europe, America, the Middle East, the Far East, the actual leadership, name names, the presidents, the kings, the queens, the prime ministers. It's their job to intervene in that moment in time. Because if you'd have asked that question to me as a military leader or as a prime minister, I'd have said, well, actually, I can do something right now. I can suspend relationships with that country. I can boycott that country. I can even send my army into that country. And I can do something practically right now. So the answer is not, I think people sometimes look at the wrong people for the answer here. We can't let our political class, the same people, our leaders, right, Muslims, non-Muslims, whatever they might be, that are in charge of our countries, off the hook by saying, oh, law's failing. It's not the law that's failing. Law's there. You know and I know that if I go and shoot somebody in the street, it's a crime.
Yeah.
Right? But it's only effective if the law is enforced by in a domestic level by the police, at the international level by states and their armies.
Yeah.
It's the only way it works.
Doesn't that point towards almost, if you're working in this arena, then those who are working in this arena are almost endorsing an imperialist tool then of international law? Because if we have a premise here that this is, the elitists are taking advantage of it, they can excuse themselves from it. So working within that framework simply endorses their position.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think torturing somebody is wrong?
Absolutely.
Right, so that's international law, right? Right there, Convention Against Torture. So are you endorsing that imperialist system? Are you, by saying that torture is wrong, endorsing that imperialist system by recognizing something that's abhorrent between people and then saying there should be a convention against it? Now that's not endorsing an imperialist system.
Sure.
What I would say then is those people that are torturing, doesn't matter who they are, where they come from, whether it's the United States, who we know for a fact tortured people in Iraq, whether it's the United Kingdom that we know for a fact were complicit in torture in places like Pakistan during the War on Terror, whether it was those states, holding them to account, but by what standard? If you abandon international, if I say, okay, let's forget international law, what you're actually doing is you're endorsing their ability to do that without holding them to account to a standard, right? And international law is, well, you've agreed to this standard. You're breaking this standard. You should be held accountable to this. It's why I go after British politicians, British civil servants, and actors across the globe.
Let me come to that in a minute. Let me come to
Yeah,
that. Let's go back a little bit, take a step back. For an individual to say, I'm against against torture, it's not the same as a lawyer who's working in that field, who, unless you tell me otherwise, is unable to bring the perpetrators of those crimes to court, because then you're almost pretending that there is an instrument here that will redress the violence, in this case torture, for example, yet you cannot do it unless you can tell me, yes, you can do it. Then obviously the floor is yours.
So what you're asking me is, do you ever win?
Yes,
Right?
that's right.
And the answer to that is we win a lot. We win a lot.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the simple legal victory, which then sets a precedent. If you just look through the International Court of Justice's rulings just on Gaza and just in Palestine, the occupied territories, they've repeatedly ruled in the favor of the Palestinian people, from apartheid to settlements being unlawful, to illegal occupation, to illegal war, but the whole lot. You've got the legal judgments. They're wins after wins after wins after wins. So it's not endorsing the imperialist system. When you do that, it depends the type of law you are, really. I mean, you have when you're litigating that, you have to do it with a recognition of the limit the system has and the limit that powerful states have. I think it's wrong to litigate this and pretend that everything is perfectly fine. I think it's correct to litigate this and say these are the failings of the system, and we have to fix that system. And there are ways to fix that system, so I'm sure you're going to want to ask me about it. But right now, the fact of the matter is that the codification of what's right and wrong between people is important. And it's important to enforce that. And it's important to get the wins where you can. I mean, it's not by accident that in my criminal trials, for example, people that are accused of really terrible things sometimes are found not guilty. It's not by accident that for example, let's just look at 2009 and Zippy Livni's arrest
Yeah.
warrant application.
Give me the background to that. What happened there?
So in 2009, I was involved in a legal team, I led a legal team that applied for an arrest warrant for an Israeli former foreign minister called Zippy Livni. So Zippy Livni was somebody who had been accused by us and others of being a primary actor in war crimes in Operation Cast Lead in Gaza. So it was their first strike. So he was a political actor for command control responsibility in a war crime. And we went to a British court in front of a British judge with evidence, and we asked for an arrest warrant, and we got that arrest warrant. And what that meant was that for a couple of years, there were a schism between the United Kingdom and Israel because politicians from Israel accused of war crimes couldn't come here. Now, of course, if she'd been here in that interim period, the United Kingdom police would have been obliged to arrest her and we could have prosecuted her. But she couldn't come. She couldn't come in those 2 years. And what happened then was the political class, and this is where I put the entirety of the failure of blame, is with the political class. They amended the legislation to inject politics into the legal system to prevent people like me easily applying for arrest warrants based on evidence for people that they didn't want to be prosecuted. And we've still got that happening even now.
Let me go back a little bit. So you have international law that is basically drafted by the powerful nations of the world, and they've been given the power of veto. Let's draw a comparison. In a domestic law, when somebody commits a crime, the police actually first catches you, then takes you to a court. What's the system in international law?
Yeah.
So who do you go to when you find somebody breaching, say, human rights or committing a genocide? What do you do? How does that operate in your arena?
I think the thing I'm going to say to you about this is just to say to you that in the same way that I was sure that we would get an arrest warrant as Zippy Livni, I am a 100%, not 99%, 100% sure there will be accountability actions in Western countries against people that have committed war crimes in the last 2 years. Israeli actors in Gaza, for example, Israeli IDF soldiers. I'm sure about that.
Why are you so confident?
Because I'm working on it and I know the strength of my work, and I don't want to go into my engagement with Western police agencies, but there is an appetite for that. There is an appetite for that.
Appetite from whom?
From police forces.
International forces?
Domestic forces across so there isn't an international force that can do something like that. But I mean, I don't want to give too much away because obviously a lot of this work is ongoing at the moment. But I am speaking regularly to police forces in multiple countries that originally were a bit hostile to this approach, but now are actually sometimes contacting me and saying, we have this question for you about this issue. We want some information about this. Can you give it to us? And we're actively supplying that. Now, I'm not relying on the police forces because we have the ability to do private arrest warrants. But it's not just that. It's not just that, Ishmael. The world is not just Western governments. The world is not just the United States. There is a whole host of countries outside of this forum. You know already that Turkey has taken the step to issue arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and others in respect of war crimes in Gaza. Now, I know that other states are also looking at that, and there is a process, and there will be a time. If I say to you, for example, without naming things, but sometimes law and accountability is slow, and that's why I couldn't give that lady an answer. It's for the politicians to act in the immediate space. It's for the Security Council to act in the immediate space. But sometimes you can have accountability actions 10 years later, 20 years later. People are still being prosecuted, investigated for genocides and war crimes that happened decades ago. And also, the actors from World War II that were complicit in annihilation and war crimes against the Jews in Germany were prosecuted in the 80s and 90s. And so you don't know how time is going to change. Accountability sometimes comes slowly, but I can promise you it will come.
I just want to, before we expand on overall, where does the ICC and ICJ fit in all this?
So the ICJ is an instrument of the United Nations. And so, we have the United Nations Charter, and the United Nations Charter regulates the relationships of member states of the UN, which is basically almost everybody in the world, And where there is a dispute between states, so it's a state against a state dispute, the ICJ is the court or the venue where one state will argue with another state about a dispute, or the General Assembly Security Council can bring an issue of law to the attention of the ICJ for a ruling. And I'm just going to make something quite clear here, right? Because a lot of people get this wrong about these so-called advisory opinions. So you have, if two countries are fighting with each other and they're under the jurisdiction of the ICJ, and the ICJ makes a ruling, that becomes binding on the two states because that's their agreement under the Charter. If a country goes to the ICJ, or the General Assembly asks for hey, ICJ, listen, there's this thing happening. What is the law about it? The ICJ will create what's called an advisory opinion. And lots of people say it's non-binding. It's nonsense. It's a trickery by powerful states to mischaracterize the ICJ's ruling. An advisory state is advising you what the settled legal position is. So that settled legal position is what's binding between those states. And how that comes into action is that when I'm in a domestic court and I'm arguing something in the United Kingdom, I will tell the domestic court, this is the ICJ's settlement of this legal position. And that's how that works. And then you asked about the ICC, which was actually one of my favorite institutions in the world. And something that I thought we needed.
You said it was past tense.
It was. Because one of the reasons I became an international lawyer was because of the ICC. I was reading about the Rome Statute before it was a thing, right? And I was being trained in international law by lawyers that devised the Rome Statute and put that together. People are still heroes of mine because they did it in a really important way. And it was a really important task. Now, why I say is because, well, let me talk about what it is, first of all. It's a treaty organization with, I think it's 125 states now, that agree to prosecute the most serious crimes in the world. So it's genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. And that's really important. And what they've decided to do is to create an organization where if they see widespread and systematic crimes of that kind, of that nature, not only can they make rulings of it like the ICJ can, they can actually arrest people and prosecute them. And how they do that, because they don't have a police force, they should have a police force, frankly. The way they do that is those member states commit to allowing their police forces to comply with their obligations under the Rome Statute, which is the organization's legal document, and arrest somebody. So, for example, Benjamin Netanyahu was an arrest warrant against it. If he was to travel into the United Kingdom would have a legal obligation to arrest him and send him to the ICC, to The Hague, for prosecution. Now, why I say it was my favorite organization is because it was so badly needed.
Yeah.
But the reason why it's no longer currently the concept is still my favorite concept, but the organization itself has become something which has allowed itself, not by its own fault, but by failure of the states around it, to become weakened by the United States' attack on it, Israel's attack on it, and fear by Western states who are party members, not just Western states, so we're being a bit unfair there, states generally that are members of it, to kowtow and be fearful of the United States' imperialistic ambitions and not really enforce the rules within it properly and not support the organization properly. I mean, the fact that there are sanctions against lawyers and judges from within that organization and member states have done nothing about it is absolutely disgraceful.
Somebody might be listening to this and say, this is just moral theatre, this ICJ and international law. I mean, let's face it. But as long as the powerful say what they like or they do not sign up to this, they will just put it on the side and say, hey, I'm going to carry on.
I mean, we're only young. Humanity's young. We're not that sophisticated. We only invented engines about 1,000 years ago, right? It's not that long. We're not that advanced in our understanding of how we should behave towards each other. It's not that long ago you could go across to somebody and if you were stronger than them, you just grabbed them.
I think most probably somebody would argue that humanity is
Well,
going to the reverse way. We're getting worse.
Well, not necessarily.
We were better before, most probably.
Just correct, man, not 1,000, 125 years ago. But the point is, it wasn't that long ago since we invented. It wasn't that long ago since we abolished slavery.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't that long ago since apartheid became a thing that we were like, hang on a minute, this is something we can't accept as civilized people. It wasn't that long ago since we coined the concept of genocide. So we're like in a baby stage of all this development. And sometimes I think we're in this really weird stage of blind enlightenment. We know everything, right? We've got computers. I can Google the most intricate aspects of law and government policy and geopolitics from that computer sitting in front of you, and then we close our eyes to it. So maybe we have to go through this period of knowing everything and being blind to it for the second time in our rememberable history before we realize actually we have to do something different. Because don't forget, most of these laws came out of World War II. Let me just remind you, everybody talks about 6 million Jews that were killed, and 12 million people that were put to death by the Nazis. But the totality of people that died in World War II is 75 million people. It's not a small number. That etched on our minds the need for these rules and regulations. And what I felt over my own career, Ishmael, is as time's gone away from that memory, we've started to break the rules again. Maybe we need another event, a worldwide event, to remind us of the need for these rules.
I think we don't want to go towards catastrophe, irrespective of what it brings about.
I think we're naturally heading towards that. I don't think this is something that I'm wishing for, but what I see happening on the geopolitical face of the earth is we are at the brink of war after war after war of a type that we might not be able to come back for. We've got the occupied territories as a hotspot. We've got Taiwan as a hotspot. We've got Ukraine as a hotspot. We've got now Greenland as a hotspot, and we've got Iran as a hotspot. And we've just gone through Syria. We've just gone through Iraq. We've gone through the Egyptian counter-revolution. I mean, we are in a really dangerous place. And what's the common denominator in all these places? It's the closing your eyes to the rule of law, principles of justice, and that might and power is the thing that people will listen to. The bottom common denominator of all of this, of turning, you've asked me a number of times in this interview, do we need this? Do we need law? Is it just a fiction? What's the alternative? I'll tell you what the alternative is. It's not just on the international level, powerful states taking what they want, but it's on a domestic level, people taking what they want. If I see that there is no adherence to international law, there's no adherence to domestic law, I'll go buy some weapons, get a gun, and go take what I want, because that is how this happens. That's how people resort to violence, because they learn. I know you want to go to your next question. They learn that if my leadership is telling me that power is right, then that's the same for me. I want to say this one thing. I have had clients who are involved in criminal gangs tell me that they are no different from the government. They, as foot soldiers, they're no different from the government, except the government are currently in charge. When they become as powerful as the government, they will be the government.
Let me put a proposal to you. You say that, humanity needs to progress. 1,000 years ago, even 100 years ago, people with the biggest gun ruled. Right. And that's true. But that's also true today. What people might say, I might argue, is that not only now countries with the biggest guns are winning, but countries who drafted this international law are also winning because they are the ones with the biggest guns. So you're giving them an extra instrument to progress with their violation. So we're creating a whole system now in which it is justifiable to commit the crimes, to commit genocide. And hey, you know what? We can keep on playing you with all these terminologies and concepts and ideas and institutes. Or we're going to do as we did 1,000 years ago.
Except you know the story of Frankenstein.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So what you do is you have to be, like I said to you, we're only young in our development on international law. There is an end point, because if you don't learn the lessons from the past and the present for that matter, you are going to end up in a position where you create a monster which will then attack you.
Yes.
Europe just found that out in the last few weeks over Greenland. They just found out, hey, it's all great. We're all really happy because we're the ones benefiting. And then suddenly America goes, hey, hang on. We want you now. We want from you. We're not going to support you in Ukraine like you wanted us to. We want your money. And suddenly Europe goes, hang on a minute, that's not right. You heard Mark Carney's speech at Davos. Yeah. He has just suddenly accepted the known truth for decades. Not that Trump broke international law, that it was a fiction from the beginning. And and that's the point, because if you carry on, it doesn't matter if you're the United States, it doesn't matter if you're the United Kingdom, it doesn't matter if you're Germany, Europe, Canada, Australia. It doesn't matter if you are the powerful states. This monster will eventually come and eat you. So the warning is there for them. It's plain. I'm just really grateful that finally the veil has been lifted. We're able to talk about what somebody might have. If I was saying this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you'd have been saying it's a bit of a conspiracy theory. The leaders of the powerful states in the world, the middle powers, are talking about it on the world stage. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's no longer veiled. It's no longer hidden. It's now the truth.
Okay. So how would you want this to progress? The vision you have, and to have these instruments to bring about law and order and justice around the globe. How do you think we should progress with?
I don't blame powerful states for doing what powerful states do. Powerful states are designed, or states are designed to grab power for themselves from everybody else and from their people. I blame people for this. I blame me. I blame you. I blame the people that are going to be watching this podcast, because it's our responsibility to ensure that the way we want to live our lives, the values that we want to live under, the protection we want for other people, we organize and we make sure that we explain what that is to our leadership. And if our leadership doesn't like it, we have to remove them. And in a democratic system, you do it through discussion and voting. And if they remove the democratic apparatus, I'm going to make this very clear so I'm not misinterpreted. If your democratic government removes the democratic apparatus for you, you do it by force. You do it by revolution. You do it by resistance. What you don't do is you don't pretend that your problems are going to be solved by abusing other people in your own country and abroad just so that you can have an easy way of life. What people need to do is they need to organize, create structures. They need to understand the kinds of things that we're talking about, and they need to hold power directly to account in their own states and say, this is not the way we want to live, because the way living like this ends in catastrophe for you and for us.
So you mentioned about, being very confident, almost 100%, that the people who perpetrated the genocide in Gaza would be brought to justice in one form or the other. Are you doing any work that you can point towards which gives us that confidence?
Yes. So, I mean, I, as part of my legal work, and also I'm director of the International Centre of Justice for Palestinians. And the International Centre of Justice for Palestinians going forward has a very clear accountability project. We are currently, we have vast volumes of evidence showing the crimes of the Israelis in Gaza, the Israeli government, and the IDF. And we have identified a significant number of individuals, politicians, soldiers, that we think there's significant evidence of perpetration of war crimes. And so we are dealing with that on a global level. We have a number of projects. So in the UK alone, we have already initiated, but I can't talk about them due to restrictions, private prosecutions with regards to some of these people, or initiated them at least. We have police complaints where we are regularly engaging with police officers about the same issue. We have supplied a number of police forces, a mechanism that I don't want to discuss, with information and evidence about criminal activities and individual suspects. But one of the most significant, important projects that we have at the moment is something we call Global 195. And this is a project to repeat what we're doing in the United Kingdom with Zippy Livni back in 2009 and what we're doing here in every country in the world. And we have, it takes time. It takes a long time to prepare these applications. But we are trying to do a number of things in terms of giving police forces across the globe the evidence to prosecute, but unfortunately having to explain to them and educate them about how this law works, how their systems might be improved to be able to actually prosecute these people. But most importantly, make them understand that just because their political leadership doesn't want it to happen, them themselves have an independent duty to meet this criterion and prosecute. And so we're doing quite a lot already on this front.
Okay, that brings us to another sort of area, and it's quite personal in a way, because you're of course dealing with very powerful nations and personalities, trying to prosecute people who are still in power, while they're in power actually. Is there repercussions at the personal level, or
And there's the, I mean, yeah, of course there are. It's a, it's not secret that if you're going to do this kind of work, you have to have a contingency plan because you might not be allowed to do it the more successful you get. Well, I'm lucky because I live in the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom still is a democracy that does allow the rule of law to be litigated in court. And what I'd say to you is that, and it's difficult, so you have to have this contingency. But do you know what? I'm not really, I'm not really turning my mind to that, Ishmael, because I'll tell you why I'm not. Okay, and I know it's personal, but I think about the alternative consequence. What if the people, I mean, it's hard to say it because I'm not somebody with relatives or family in Gaza, but what if I had? One of the best things that perpetrators of war crimes do for themselves is to dehumanize the victim. And I don't think that I could spend a single minute of my life not engaged in an accountability structure when I think of the men, women, and children that I've met that have been harmed in war, not just in Gaza, but across the world. This has to be what I do with my life. And I am surprised that other people don't see it like that until I see the massive effort that perpetrators of war crimes put into dehumanizing their victims, blaming their victims, talking about the fact that every victim is a terrorist. Every victim might grow up to be a terrorist. Every victim might have given birth to somebody who's not there yet that will grow up to be a terrorist. The manipulation that the media have in this, the fact that if you are, and I'm going to just say it plainly, as an officer of the court, and I don't really care about the consequence, if you're brown and you're Muslim, you are more likely to be prosecuted for terrorism in the United Kingdom than if you're white and not Muslim and you have done the exact same thing. You're more likely to be punished harsher if you're brown and you're Muslim, right? It's just a simple fact of the prejudice that infects our legal system. Now, I know that somebody might say to me, well, it was improper for you to say, but I can demonstrate it through legal cases, through cases where I get prosecution documents from the Crown Prosecution Service, where I think to myself, why is that not terrorism? Why is that not terrorism? And then I get documents where I think, why is that terrorism? And there is a simple common denominator that distinguishes the two. Now, I was taught a long time ago by a judge, actually, in a case where if you have two situations that are exactly the same, right, and it's not your job to identify the prejudice, it's your job to identify the difference and ask the person that's making the decision why it is that you're distinguishing between those two. And I think it's just simple prejudice, but also, unfortunately, because it fits into a narrative of foreign policy, dehumanizing the enemy and making sure that we can do the things to people in other countries that we want to do to them without being called to account by good, decent British people from every part of the United Kingdom community.
Okay, then that brings me back to the whole idea of international law. Would the world be more dangerous without it, or would the world just simply be more honest and accept what's happening? Is international law almost giving them cover then?
No, because you see, we're dealing with human beings, right? Whether you're Donald Trump or whether you're some dictator from some faraway state that doesn't look anything like what we think a Democrat looks like. You're all human beings. Do you think Zippy Livni thought that one day a British court would issue a warrant for her arrest? Not in a million years did she think that. They live in the position of never knowing when the accountability hammer of justice is going to land on them. And that is something that restrains power. Even if it doesn't restrain it very much, it restrains power. And it's crucial and it's important that we keep that hammer hanging over the most powerful people on the globe and saying to them, look, ultimately, if you violate all our rights, our right to life, we will fight back, we will resist that wherever we are. That's just in human nature. But before we get to that stage, right, we have rules, we have law, we have principles of justice. That's where we are at. And it's important to make sure that they feel that. And I just want to say this to you as well. A mistake that I've made in the past is to let politicians off the hook once they finish their term in office. No longer are we prepared to do that. This is a decision that a politician will make to enact a war crime, to give impunity to war criminals, to be complicit in war crimes while they're in office. But it's a human decision they make as individuals. They should not be allowed to forget that when they're out of office. And I, for one, will not suffer another politician that leaves their throne of power and then says to me, oh yeah, that's what I thought all along. Now I'm going to work for world peace. They will be held accountable for what they did in office, outside of office, for the rest of their lives while I'm in work by me.
We focused very much on international law vis-a-vis human rights and war crimes and crimes against humanity, but international also covers a huge spectrum, and particularly something that's impacting the whole globe, like environment, cyber warfare, espionage, and so forth. Do you think international law is keeping up with those realities that are now emerging beyond this human rights aspect?
Not at all. Where we not even like things that are about to come, like advanced AI and all this. I mean, I have a real problem with tech generally. I mean, I love my tech, and I have lots of tech, and my kids take the mickey out of me being like having like Alexa and things like that all over my house, right? But what I really am worried about is something that's related to that, but not quite that. It's the ability that, or the position that corporates, massive conglomerate corporates have taken, where sometimes organizations or companies that are advancing this tech are becoming more powerful and bigger than states.
Yeah.
And that's a worry for me, because whereas you have international law that regulates a state, where's the international law that regulates these tech companies that becomes more powerful than the state?
Yeah.
And you see some of this happening with Elon Musk and X, and the way that the United Kingdom is kind of pushing back on that. But you see how powerful he is in being able to besmirch, belittle, and push his agenda because he has this power from the platforms that he owns. And this is of real concern. And we're way behind this regulation. Regulation is good because what it does is it regulates the behavior of these organizations. It means that it's done fairly. It means it's done for everybody. If you lose that regulation, then we're in a really dangerous position. And if you I don't know, you subcontract or you invest your thinking as a human being into a machine,
Yeah.
I think we've got some really dangerous things that are about to.
With the new problems emerging and the problems we have already got in existence, to strengthen international law, I know while there are relationship between nations, do you think there is room that this should be at least monitored by individuals and organizations rather than states?
You mean by NGOs and things like that? I mean, I think that happens anyway, right? I mean, I think that happens anyway. But you're talking about the lack of enforcement from governmental institutions, right? What enforcement do NGOs have? What ability do they have? You have great work for people like Amnesty that expose the hacking software, for example, and that's a good example of exposure. What happens when you get to a stage where you expose this, and the powerful company, corporate, and the state says, so what? What are you going to do at that point? I mean, we're almost certain, aren't we, that most tech spies on you.
Yes.
Right? And what do? We all still buy our Samsungs, our iPhones. We all still buy our Alexas. I just talked about it myself, knowing that it's spying on you. I mean, it's becoming an inevitability. I think it becomes more important than just knowing this to actually the regulation and do something about it. But I think it's crucial that organizations, NGOs, highlight this and explain to regular people like me, this is what's happening to you with the tech.
To summarize, we're coming up towards the end of our discussion. It will carry on for a long, long time. So what do you think are the greatest threat to international law? And what things you think we should be doing to improve international law?
So I think what the biggest threat to international law is the abuse of it by the powerful states in their own self-interest. I think we've got the global. I mean, we had this hope of the global South asserting itself, but then we had the rectification of that. You had Trump just literally traveling to South Africa, to the ASEAN countries, and just saying, "Hey guys, sign here or else." Going to the Middle East and saying, "Give us a $1 trillion deal, you, and you," and they're going, "Okay then." I think we've got to learn an important lesson from that. These states have to unify in order to become effective. They have to decentralize from the single central financial economic system that America has hold of. I mean, that's where the power comes from. They have to create a multipolar global system that creates some equality. Then there's no point doing that if everybody that's doing that is bastardizing and abusing international law. There has to be a resurgence of people saying, actually, these rules are really important. We like these rules. They protect you from me and me from you, and we want to enforce them. Once that starts to happen at a global level, we'll start to see less war, more peace. But it won't happen until the populations in those states start holding their leadership accountable. And that won't happen until in every community, in every organization, in every workplace, people start to organize and understand that their liberty, their freedom, their right to self-protection is being ripped away from them.
Okay. Final question. You've talked about the pros and cons of international law, how it's being derailed by the powerful nations. We've also discussed the potential repercussions on the individuals who are trying to redress the injustices around the world, particularly international lawyers here. Would you advise young people to join the profession of international law? And if you do, what do you think are the benefits of that in the long run?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that is a sort of misnomer if you're going to do international law. Look, I can be an international law and I can work at the ICC full time, right? And I can get cases that come to me and I can just look at that little isolated thing. That's easy. I can go after the most powerful people's enemies. That's easy, right? Try representing the rights of the enemy. That's difficult. Try representing somebody where there is no legal structure for them. That's not easy. If you're going to enter into a world of international law and if you're going to do it for making money, go ahead, be one of those kinds of lawyers. There's plenty of them. If you're going to do it to effect a change, you have to understand the reality of our system. International law doesn't work in isolation. There is a real rules-based order. That rules-based order is corrupt. It needs to be fixed. So you have to approach this, if you want to make a change, that you're actually a political lawyer, you're a diplomatic lawyer, and you're an international law lawyer. You have to bring all these things together. Many of my clients do not have a resolution in a courtroom. You have to construct the resolution for them the best you can within the belly of the beast, within that monster that is attacking everybody, and do your best for those individuals to try to prevent what? Harm and death. That's what you have to do. So I would encourage as many people that are interested in law to work in this area, work in it with the realization that it's not just something that you do, you just read the rules and decide, well, that's what I'm going to do. You have to look beyond that and say, well, who is not getting a remedy? Who is not getting justice? Who is not getting a solution? How do I, as a lawyer, fix that problem? That's what an international lawyer should be doing.
So is there an appetite for those kind of changes, do you think, within the global society?
Law is not something that's given to us. We take it. I demand it. If I walk out in the street and a police officer says to me, I want to search your car just because I don't like the way you look, I'm not going to let him do that. I'm going to ask him for his reasons, his grounds. If he pushes me, I'll push him back. I don't mean physically. I'm talking about in the discussion. If he illegally searches my property, my house, or arrests me, I'm going to sue him. I'm going to demand my rights. I do not understand why people think that your rights are going to be given to you. Your right, a state's job is to diminish your rights and have power for itself. You have to demand this. You have to pull it back. You have to say to them, if you don't give it to me, I will take my rights. That's the way this should work.
So I think we end on a very good note that people should understand rights are something to be fighting for as well.
Absolutely. Without fail, every single second of your living, breathing life, you should be fighting to secure your rights and protect yourself and your family.
Tayyab Ali, thank you very much for joining me and wish you all the best with your endeavor and all your campaigns in the coming future.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. Thanks.
Dr. Ismail, after your discussion with Tayyab, do you think international law actually works, or is it a powerful tool for powerful countries to legitimize what they want to do?
I think I'll be honest, before I started that interview, that was my perception was international law was there just simply to consolidate the position of the powerful countries. So Tayyab was quite honest to say that it is being used by the international community. But to abandon it at this stage, I think to fall in a piece for the international community. And therefore, there's something here that is not perfect, but it is something we can work around and hopefully make it consolidated so that it can address the injustices. And it's a fight, it's a battle. So we're on a curve in the right direction. And I think we should be working towards trying to make sure that it can help those people who find themselves at the hands of the oppressors.
Absolutely. Something you touched on with Tayyab as well. If international law can't stop Gaza, can't prosecute Western countries for their war crimes, can't hold Israel accountable, quite simply, people may ask, well, what's the point of it?
Well, I think the point of it would be there'd be a collapse of not just the Western world order, but very much the nation states that we see and how they're operating. Because what that could happen, this could spiral around Africa and Asia, and you could have violence everywhere around the world. So while, yes, we totally agree at the moment that the violence that is perpetrated by Western-centric countries are getting away with it at the end, rather than saying, therefore, we surrender to it, say they shouldn't be allowed to get away with it and bring everybody together.
Absolutely. Yeah. It gave us a very, very fantastic insight. It's almost like an international 101. So we're listening to. But the question that I've got for you, and final question, is international actually delaying other forms of justice, liberation, resistance, or is it worth pursuing?
But I think you touched something very significant in your question there. Other forms. There is no other forms. Then we can say there's a bankruptcy in the international community.
Exactly.
And this is the least worst thing we have got.
Yeah.
So unless there's something better we can replace it with, this is what we're going to have to work with. And I think that's the dilemma we find ourselves in. That this is an order, a world order, Western-centric world order, which this has been created by. Unless we change all that and bring something better, I think we'll have to work within this framework in the best way we can.
And how does your average person, let's say, that works in a job, how do we begin to combat?
I think they have to make sure that this becomes an election issue. This becomes how you see the world, that you become concerned about not just your personal affairs, but affairs that are impacting people around the globe. And that will become soon what also impacts you, because towards the end we talk about environment, AI, cyber, all those things are going to impact each and every individual around the globe. And maybe that might bring people together. Who knows?
Absolutely. Dr. Ismail, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If this conversation sparks something in you, share it, talk about it, and keep asking the difficult questions.